hip-hop, rap world goes, you know. Tupac, my brother, was king of the hill, top dog, king of rap. And with it comes a lot of envy, jealousy, and, you know, all types of things. And all I can make of it is there were groups of people who were jealous and envious and full of hate.
For years, Tupac's story seemed carved in stone: a late-night shooting in Las Vegas, a frantic rush to the hospital, 6 days of fighting for his life, and then the tragic end. It's the version everyone knows, the one echoed by news reports, documentaries, and countless interviews.
It's been 27 years, all kind of suspicions, all kind of, you know, but until we could actually prove something.
But now, that story might not be what we all believed. Tupac's brother, Mopreme Shakur, recently broke his silence, calm, composed, and unwavering. In his interview with Piers Morgan, he said something that stopped everyone in their tracks. "We've been fed lies for years."
Tupac Shakur was American hip-hop's brightest light until he was shot 4 times in a drive-by attack in 1996. His death shocked the world.
This isn't some online conspiracy, this is family. Mopreme grew up alongside Tupac, lived his life with him, and knew him better than almost anyone. So when he speaks, people listen. He remembers a moment years back when someone came forward, claiming they had nothing to do with Tupac's death. Mopreme and his team heard them out, but even then, he wasn't fully convinced.
Tupac's legend has only grown since his along with the fever speculation about who planned it, who ordered it, and who did it. For 27 years, it was one of America's highest profile unsolved crimes until finally, a year ago, Dwayne "Keefy D" Davis was charged. He'd bragged about being inside the Cadillac from which the fatal shots were fired, albeit not by him.
And then there's Diddy. For years, he insisted he had no connection to Tupac's death. But in 2008, more than a decade later, he personally reached out to the Shakur family through radio host Big Boy to clear the air. It wasn't a casual gesture, it was intentional. Most innocent people ignore rumors, but Diddy felt the need to defend himself.
Puffy was involved.
Only they can answer that question. I have my own opinion, but I wouldn't slander their name like they did mine. I wouldn't say things that I knew, you know what I mean? I believe so. I do believe so. I have proved things that I can say that will back up my claim, but this is not for the world to know about. You know what I mean? It's between me and him, and only he knows.
Even with lawyers and advisors likely shaping every word, Mopreme wasn't convinced. He listened, measured Diddy's denial, and quietly let his doubts linger. The message was subtle but unmistakable. The truth always finds a way out. This isn't just another retelling of Tupac's death, it's a fracture in the version we thought we knew. A glimpse beyond the headlines, reminding us that the most powerful voices often belong to those who lived it. Years after the noise faded, a quiet ripple has begun to build into a wave. Mopreme Shakur isn't shouting or performing. He's calm, deliberate, choosing his words carefully, pausing just long enough for others to connect the dots. And while he speaks softly, the ground beneath one of the music industry's most powerful figures is starting to shift. Legal investigations, federal raids, homes search, the scaffolding of influence is cracking. People once silent are now speaking. When institutions once deemed untouchable begin to wobble, old stories take on new meaning. That 2008 phone call, once dismissed as simple damage control, now reads differently. It feels less like clearing the air and more like a desperate attempt to contain a story that was slipping away. If you truly believe the official version, you don't keep searching for answers decades later. Most people would let it rest. Mopreme didn't. He isn't chasing headlines. He's being meticulous, offering small, revealing truths instead of sweeping accusations. And that restraint makes his words hit harder, like a single puzzle piece that suddenly changes the entire picture. He's not feeding tabloid drama, he's demanding that old questions finally get real answers. And the timing matters. When powerful figures face renewed legal scrutiny, what was once buried often resurfaces. That doesn't prove guilt, but it reframes everything. Words that once seemed harmless now carry weight. Whatever side you're on, this moment forces a reevaluation, dusting off old facts, re-examining the narrative, and asking whether the puzzle still fits. If Mopreme's instincts are right, history may be rewritten. For years, people thought the story was over, but as the pressure builds, it's clear Diddy feels the walls closing in. You can almost picture him picking up the phone, trying to steer the narrative. But here's the thing, once you're scrambling to prove your innocence, the control you thought you had is already gone. And Mopreme's quiet warning, the truth always comes out, no longer sounds ominous, it sounds prophetic.
But is your belief now that Diddy may have been involved in that first shooting?
I don't know, Piers. I don't know. Thus the investigation. None of us know. This is the best way for us to get some answers, to have an actual investigation into his, regardless of who was responsible or the who's that were responsible in each incident.
For years, Diddy has publicly denied any connection to Tupac's death, but behind the scenes, investigators may have held onto something far more incriminating. These aren't street whispers or internet rumors, they're federal interrogation tapes, and the numbers alone are shocking. Diddy's name reportedly appears 47 times in connection with Tupac's murder. The recordings include statements from Keefe D, the same man now charged in relation to Tupac's killing. He wasn't speaking in private, he was under federal lights, on record, allegedly describing how Diddy supposedly offered millions for the deaths of Tupac and Suge Knight. One line from those tapes keeps resurfacing, a chilling phrase that could completely alter the story we thought we knew. It raises serious questions. Why were these tapes kept under wraps for decades if they didn't matter? And why would prosecutors consider Keefe D credible enough to build a case unless there was real weight behind his claims? Meanwhile, Diddy spent those same decades growing his empire, collecting awards, preaching peace, and repeatedly denying any involvement in Tupac's murder. But all the while, those tapes sat in evidence lockers, silent but powerful, like shadows waiting for the right moment to emerge. Now, with Diddy reportedly facing racketeering charges and his empire under a microscope, those old recordings could finally come back into play. Prosecutors often revisit past evidence to reinforce new cases, and if they can connect Diddy to organized crime today, what's to stop them from tracing those threads all the way back to the 90s?
Essentially saying what is really on your mind. Because you know, and I know, that everyone believes that Diddy was involved in both these things and had a direct involvement in your brother's. That is what the streets have said for 27 years.
PVD's claims about million-dollar bounties suddenly don't sound like rumors. They sound like a missing puzzle piece in one of music's greatest mysteries. If those tapes ever make it to court, Diddy's denials could crumble as fast as the empire he built on them. And it doesn't stop there. When federal agents raided Diddy's homes, they weren't hunting for evidence tied to Tupac. They were after financial records, racketeering trails, and modern business files. But sometimes, the most revealing discoveries come by accident. Buried deep in the paperwork, investigators reportedly found documents stamped with a single word, Cuba. To most people, that might mean nothing. But in a story this tangled, nothing is random. That one word connects to a long-standing theory that Tupac may have faked his death and fled to Cuba, the same island where his aunt, Assata Shakur, has lived in exile since 1984. Suddenly, what once sounded like conspiracy begins to feel plausible. Then there's Michael Nice, a man who once worked closely with Tupac's circle. He claimed that after the Vegas shooting, a secret plan was put in motion, a body swap at the hospital, a private jet waiting on standby, and a flight path straight to Cuba. It sounded like a spy thriller, not a police report, which is why most news outlets dismissed it. But then Michael Nice vanished, no farewell, no explanation, no trace. When eyewitness claims vanish along with the people who made them, the line between fact and fiction blurs quickly. Now imagine pairing those old stories with references to Cuba allegedly found in the private records of major industry figures. Suddenly, what used to be fan fiction starts to feel like something investigators can't ignore. If those documents include travel logs, coded messages, or financial notes, anything suggesting movement, payments, or repeated names, that's not proof Tupac is alive. But in any serious investigation, patterns matter. Repeated mentions, recurring figures, familiar trails, those are the clues that turn rumors into evidence worth chasing. In Havana, whispers persist: grainy photos, alleged sightings, a tall man in a cafe who looks just familiar enough to spark debate. Maybe it's fantasy, or maybe it's time to investigate again. Because even if the stories aren't true, the number of unanswered questions demands attention. If prosecutors or journalists ever bring those documents to light, it won't just reopen an old case, it'll raise new questions. Who knew what, when, and why were certain leads buried? It may not rewrite history instantly, but it forces the world to re-examine a chapter it thought was closed. And just when it seems the Tupac mystery can't get stranger, the official paperwork makes it even murkier. Start with the coroner's report, supposedly the most straightforward part of the story, yet even the height and weight don't match Tupac's known stats. Simple details any examiner could confirm, but somehow they're wrong. Coincidence? Maybe, but strange nonetheless. Then comes the man who allegedly oversaw Tupac's cremation. He quit his job immediately afterward, not months later, not after a few more cases, right after Tupac, gone from the industry, just like that. You'd expect someone to treat such a high-profile case as a career milestone, not a reason to disappear. And then, that night, Las Vegas, September 7th, 1996. The city was electric after the Tyson fight. The strip overflowed with crowds, cars, cameras, flashing lights, yet somehow, no clear footage, no reliable eyewitness, no confirmed shooter. How is that possible in one of the busiest cities in the world? Even Suge Knight, sitting right beside Tupac that night, has never seemed fully convinced by the official version. Over the years, he's dropped hints that something doesn't add up. Then in 2014, during a TMZ interview, he said it outright. Why do you think nobody's been arrested? Because Tupac not gone. That one line, bold, unsettling, and impossible to ignore, reignited the question that refuses to die. What really happened to Tupac Shakur?
In a statement at the time, Diddy declared, "This story is a lie," the LA Times story.
That statement didn't come from a random internet theorist. It came from Suge Knight, the man who was in the car. When the shots were fired, he was there. He saw it unfold. So when he says Tupac isn't gone, you have to wonder, is he just stirring the pot or trying to tell the world something it still refuses to believe? At first, Suge's words might have sounded like another wild claim tossed into hip-hop's sea of rumors, but when you line them up next to all the inconsistencies, things start to look different. The coroner's report alone raises questions: wrong height, wrong weight, wrong everything. How do you get basic details like that wrong in one of the most scrutinized cases in music history? Then there were witnesses who spoke up early and suddenly went silent. Some disappeared altogether. The man who reportedly handled Tupac's cremation quit his job right after, not months later, right after. No reason, no farewell, just gone. Who walks away after handling one of the most famous cases in the world? And then there's that night, September 7th, 1996. The Vegas Strip was jammed after the Tyson fight, flashing lights, packed crowds, cameras everywhere, yet no one saw the shooter. No video, no solid witness, nothing. It's as if the entire scene was swallowed by the night. Maybe each of these things on their own is just coincidence, but together, they form a troubling pattern, one that feels uncomfortably familiar. Fast forward to today, and the same atmosphere of silence and manipulation seems to be resurfacing around Diddy. He's facing federal racketeering charges, FBI raids, and insiders flipping one after another. Prosecutors aren't treating this like another celebrity scandal. They're describing Bad Boy Records as a criminal organization built on coercion, exploitation, and fear. And then there are the infamous freak-off parties once dismissed as gossip, now being described in court. Filings as calculated traps. Guests allegedly filmed, humiliated, and blackmailed into silence. That's not fame, that's control through fear. So, if that kind of manipulation was reportedly happening in the 2000s and 2010s, an era of constant cameras and social media, what might have gone on in the 90s? When there was no digital trail and far fewer eyes watching, former insiders describe a world where no wasn't an option, where favors turned into debts and debts turned into danger. People who tried to speak up changed their stories or vanished altogether. Sound familiar? It mirrors everything we saw after Tupac's death: missing evidence, lost witnesses, and an unsolved case lingering for almost 30 years. So, was it all coincidence? Or was there already a system of fear and control operating back then? The same one prosecutors are now accusing Diddy of running today. Either way, it feels like the past is catching up. Federal agents are now combing through every inch of his empire with modern tech and limitless reach. And maybe, just maybe, the same shadows that hung over that Vegas night in '96 are finally stepping into the light. Something about that case has always felt off, not just the rumors, but the small administrative errors that don't make sense once you look closely. Take the coroner's paperwork: incorrect measurements, inconsistent notes. Sloppy mistakes don't belong in a file this famous, a file every reporter and lawyer in the world would examine. Those are the kind of errors investigators circle in red ink. Then there's the trail of people who vanish from the record, witnesses who once spoke out, suddenly quiet. One individual said to have handled the aftermath of Tupac's body reportedly walked away from the profession immediately. No press, no explanation, no trace. Individually, these are just fragments. Together, they form a pattern of absence. Now, in the category 2025, someone reportedly connected to those old cases has gone missing, unreachable, even by their own legal team. Let that sink in. In an age of constant surveillance, digital footprints, and global communication, someone simply vanishes. If that can happen now, imagine how much easier it was in the paper-heavy 90s, when records could be misplaced, systems weren't connected, and power could easily shut doors. Let's be honest, a staged disappearance or covert relocation isn't a one-person job. It takes coordination, money, and access. That means people at every level, airline staff, border officials, medical workers, even those with political connections. And that brings us back to the whispered word, Cuba. For decades, people have talked about Cuban sightings, grainy photos, and now alleged references to Cuba in private documents tied to high-profile figures. If any of that proves legitimate, it suggests more than fantasy. It hints at organized channels of communication and movement that cross international borders. That shifts the discussion from rumor to lead. If that's even partially true, the implications are enormous. It would mean re-examining how the original investigation unfolded, what leads were followed, which were ignored, and whether the silence that followed was accidental or intentional. It would also force us to ask, who benefited from a closed case instead of an open one? This isn't about promoting conspiracies. It's about recognizing that in every major event, there are small but telling traces, errors, exits, and silences that point to the human hands behind official narratives. Investigators and journalists learn to look for those traces because that's where truth hides. So the real question becomes, do you still trust the clean, convenient version we were told? Or are you willing to consider that the truth might be far messier, built on deliberate choices and coordinated secrecy? Because if that's the case, what we've been calling coincidences might actually be the footprints of a long, carefully managed cover-up. Until those files are released or witnesses speak on record, we won't know for sure. But the reopening of investigations and the surfacing of long-buried evidence suggest one thing: this story isn't over. And as the paper trails and silences begin to align, one truth remains: the answers have always been there, just hidden in plain sight. Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.